So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming. If this is your first webinar, we do these regularly at 9 p.m. And my name is David Busis, and Selene and Elizabeth, I'll just let you say hi.
Hi, it's Selene Steelman from Seven Sage.
Hi, Elizabeth Cavallari.
So today I wanted to talk briefly about both how to make a law school list when you're just starting and how to choose a law school. And I know that Selene and I have talked about the second part a little bit, but I think it might help this time if we put it in perspective and sort of started from the beginning when you're first trying to make a list. So let me just show you Seven Sage's resources before we really get started. If you don't know about the admissions course, by the way, it lives on its own admissions site. So this is the LSAT site, and most of you probably know this. If you click syllabus, you see the LSAT syllabus. But if you click right here, you can switch to the admissions site. You all can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Assuming that's a yes. Okay, so you can switch to the admissions site, and then this menu looks similar, but it's not quite the same. And when you click the syllabus, you're taken to the admissions syllabus. So again, you'll use the site switcher right here. And we have some resources in our introduction to law school admissions about how to pick a school. And I'm just going to click this lesson called How Many Law Schools Should You Apply to? And we talk about putting together a list with reaches, targets, and safeties. And then we link to our compilation of law school medians here, which is searchable if you just start typing. So it's very useful. We keep it updated. We have the predictor tool linked here. Some of you are probably familiar with this, but it spits out your chances. Obviously, you should take this with not just a couple grain of salt, but maybe a couple ice cream scoops of salt. But I think it's still a useful way to gauge whether a school is a safety or a reach or a target. And finally, it has this nifty Google Sheets template, which I think I made public. So all of you can see this. So you just go to this. You won't be able to edit it. I can because I created it. But you can always make a copy like this. And if you want, you can use it to keep track of your results. So you don't fill in the gray columns. Those fill automatically. But you pick a school like Georgetown. You just start typing. You can select it. It fills in the latest rankings, the latest median information, the deadline from the last 509 disclosures. And then this you have to choose yourself. You just you categorize it yourself as a target or a reach or whatever. So it's a good way to put together a list. You can see visually if there's a balance of, green and red. And then you can keep track of, when you applied and how you did and all that. So it's out there if you want to use it. But having said that, I would love to pick the brains of Elizabeth and Selene about just, some things you should consider as you're putting together your list initially. So Elizabeth, is that too broad of a question? Do you want me to narrow it down, or can you just start talking about some things you might want to keep in mind as you're putting together your initial list of schools?
Yeah, no, I think it's fine to start general. As you were kind of going through things, I was making notes on a piece of paper next to me. And the first one I put down was practice area. So where do you think you want to practice law? So some schools have a national reputation, and no matter where they're located, you can get anywhere across the country. Other schools are pretty limited or a little bit more limited. They're more regional than a nationally recognized law school. It doesn't mean you can't get from point A to point B there, but most likely you'll be staying closer to point A after you graduate. So how does that play a role? So not just, what are those ranking numbers, but where are their graduates going? And can you see yourself and can you envision yourself in those geographic locations after graduation? The other piece is, what type of school it is. Talking very generally, in a lot of law schools, there's kind of two types. There's ones that are in cities and that are more in college towns. They offer some advantages one way or the other, some disadvantages. So do you want to be someplace where it's really vibrant in a city where rent will probably be a lot higher than in a college town, but you have all of the exciting things of a city right at your fingertips? A disadvantage of that might be that you're not as close with your classmates because people are living all around the city and going in and out and not really hanging out with one another. Where you go to a college town, there's not, the vibrancy of the city, not as many things to do, but you might be able to get to know your classmates better, get to know faculty better. Cost of living might be a little bit cheaper, less loans. But you might not be a college town person, you're a city person. And so asking all these types of questions ahead of time, I think it's important as you're deciding where to apply to school, not just here are the rankings of the schools, but going deeper than that. What am I looking for in my 3 years in law school? Where is it going to get me after graduation? And I feel like it's much harder to make those decisions when you have 10 acceptance letters in front of you, all with different scholarship amounts. It's easier to say, I'm going to go to the school that offers me the most money. And so that still might be the best option for you, but it might be, well, I've narrowed down my list ahead of time to schools that I know will be a good fit for me during my 3 years in law school and prepare me to practice in a certain geographic area after I graduate, and comparing offers of like schools rather than having to make those really tough decisions about fit after scholarship offers are in front of you.
So what I'm hearing you say, Elizabeth, is something like it pays off to do your research and to really think about what you want to do with your career and where you want to practice before you even begin applying. Because if you only make your decisions based on the offers, you're letting the tail wag the dog. And it's nice if a school gives you a whopping scholarship, but then you still spend 3 years there. And if you get a degree and you can't do what you want with it, it still probably wasn't worth it. Is that
Absolutely.
a fair way of summarizing it?
Yes. And I think it also in the application process, you're spending a lot of money and you get a fee waiver from a school and you're like, well, it's only an extra $35 to pay the LSAT fee. I'm just going to apply there. But if it's a school you haven't spent time researching and getting to know, and then you receive an admissions letter with a scholarship, it's confusing. So taking that time to say, oh, I got a fee waiver from a school doesn't necessarily mean I need to apply there.
Oh, that's so interesting. So you don't necessarily want to apply with your money on your mind and your mind on money. You want to apply with maybe your mind on your practice area, which doesn't roll off the tongue quite as well, but is maybe a better way of making an intelligent decision. Selene, do you have any other questions that sort of pop into your head that people should be asking themselves as they draw up an initial list of schools?
Yeah, I really like Elizabeth's approach about really asking yourself the tough questions before you actually start the ball rolling in this whole law school application process. I went through this process myself twice. And for me, I feel like the key factors were geography and the area of law that I thought I wanted to practice or that I was very interested in. And so the first time around when I applied, I just thought, oh, it would be fun to go to live in this city, or I'm following an interesting person to that city, or I might just stay where I am. And I looked at the rankings and I sort of picked a couple schools based on, whether they were, T14 or T20 or T30. And I didn't really give a whole lot of thought of what that would mean. And then I ended up deferring because the place that I thought I was going to go was like in a place that I realized I never wanted to live and I never wanted to practice. And the only reason why I was going there was because that I was considering it was because of the ranking. I didn't know anybody there. I didn't have any family there. I had no connections whatsoever. And I had to ask myself, like, is this really the wise thing to do? And I had professionals saying, well, where do you want to work? You should really consider looking at the schools that are located where you want to work, because what ultimately is a law school going to provide you? Yeah, they're going to teach you some substantive law. That's fine. But mostly they're going to teach you a skill set on how to analyze facts and process information and how to be a good writer. And also they're providing you information and access to the market and the network that the school has to offer you, the alumni network, and its connections with the legal field around the law school where it's situated. And that will determine, I think, a lot of your success in finding employment. You know, something to consider is, you know, what do you want to do during the summers while you're in law school? Like, are you okay picking up and moving every summer to do an internship or a clerkship or whatever? Or would you be inclined to stay? And if you do stay, then there's a, you know, pretty good possibility that you'd be inclined to stay after you graduate as well. And would you be okay with that? So like, these are, I think, questions that people should ask themselves, like, you know, 3-4 years down the line, where do I want to be? And what am I, you know, what do I think I want to be doing? And, you know, look into sort of what the school is known for, and ask yourself, like, what am I really interested in now? Like, what do I want to get from law school right now at this point? I know that, you know, some people are like, well, specialty legal areas, like, it doesn't really mean much, you know, those specialty rankings in US News. But I think that, you know, if a school is known to have a really strong program in a particular area of law, that means that, you know, there are a lot of, they've invested in upper level elective courses and faculty, and creating programs and bringing professionals to the school. And so it's all opportunities to learn and develop that skill set that you want to build up while you're in law school. So, you know, whether a school is really, really strong in dispute resolution or ADR, and you're like, well, I have no interest in doing that, but I'm kind of interested in it right now. Like, even if you don't end up staying in that field, like, the time that you and the effort that you put into studying that while you're in law school is going to build up certain skills that you want to have as a lawyer. So I think that there's, you know, there's value to be found in, like, all different areas of legal education that a law school can provide to you. And so I think that that's something that everyone should consider as they're looking at law schools in particular geographic areas, to look into the programming and not just sort of the school as a surface. You know, what prestige value is there, or what is the ranking, or you know, if I don't graduate in the top 10%, am I ever going to get a job? I think that you can find a lot more information if you just dig a little deeper.
Well, that sort of brings us back to something Elizabeth said at the beginning. Elizabeth, you said that some schools have national reputations, and so those degrees are more portable, and some schools are, you know, better if you want to work in the area. But I think one of the reasons people do pay so much attention to rankings is that it seems like the set of schools with national reputations and the set of schools that are ranked the highest at least heavily overlaps, if not, you know, if they're not exactly the same. Is that true? I mean, do you think that these, you know, 14 or these yellow schools in the T14 or so are the ones with the national reputations, and below that it's regional, or is it more complicated than that?
I think it is a little bit more complicated than that. Certainly, I think, you know, I've seen that 1 through 16 on the screen. I mean, those ones certainly do have some of the stronger national reputations. But as you go down the list, I'm seeing something like, oh no, those are national. Those are maybe more regional to the East Coast, maybe the Midwest. But it also doesn't mean you can't get there. So if you went to the University of Georgia and you said, I want to practice in Los Angeles, it doesn't mean it can't happen, but it means you might have to work a little bit harder. So that might be, here's the question I'm going to ask from the Career Services Office. UGA gave me a lot of money. I've been to campus. I feel like it'd be a really good fit for me, but I know I want to go back to LA. Talk to their Career Services Office and say, what alums can I speak to that have gotten back there? Where are they working? What is the hiring process like? And make those connections and start building your network, where you could talk with an alum and say, he or she could say, here's how I got there. Here's the roadmap. Let me help you along the way. And you could say, all right, I feel confident going to the University of Georgia because I have career services and alums in my corner and I know they're going to help me. But it could be you talk with another school and they say, well, people have gotten there, but that's definitely a little bit harder. I mean, ultimately, that's maybe a school you might like pause a little bit more, but ultimately career services want you to be successful too, because you're part of their numbers they have to report of who received full-time employment within 12 months of graduation. So I feel like schools aren't going to sell you, most of them aren't going to sell you a false bill of goods if they're going to be honest with you about that. And so it doesn't mean that you should choose Georgetown over UGA simply because of the difference in ranking. For you may say, I need to go to the top most highly ranked school. I don't care about the cost. But for a lot of people, that's not the case. And they think about, what does loan repayment look like 3 years down the road? And so they might spend more time to look at UGA. I'm picking these just because they're right in front of my face. I'm not saying anything good or bad about either of these schools. I think they're both wonderful schools in their own rights.
Elizabeth, do you think you should ever talk to career services before you apply as you're putting together the initial list?
Maybe if the school you're seriously considering, but you can also look at the information they have on their website. So most law schools will provide, where their grads have gone. So you can see that information. And so they might not put it out, here's the actual number, but you should be able to see, I can't remember if it's on their 509 or not, but there should be information on their websites that give you an idea of where their alums go after graduation.
Yeah, there's the ABA site. I mean, David, you've got it. The employment outcomes and the bar passages. You can look at that, pick the school, and you can go back a couple of years just to see, where has this particular school sent its graduates? Where do they tend to work? Where have they taken the bar exam? And, it doesn't mean that you have to do what their graduates have historically done, but you would get a sense to see, how much alumni support might there be for someone like me if I'm graduating from this school and I want to go practice in North Dakota. Have there been any graduates who've done that, who've gone that way? Or am I going to have to sort of do this on my own, which is totally possible. But you just would need to know that you wouldn't have the institutional, as much institutional support, built-in institutional support, I guess. Got it.
So Elizabeth or Selene, I just pulled up this ABA. It's the employment summary for 2017 graduates for the University of Georgia. Can you help me read this? I mean, what should I be looking at?
Elizabeth?
Sure. So the first thing you're going to look at, what David highlighted, is bar passage required.
Okay.
So this means they accepted a job where bar passage is required. So it can range from firms. It could range from clerkships, federal, state, or local, public interest, so public defenders or prosecutors. There's some jobs like general counsel at corporations or involved in the general counsel's office are also JD required. Some government work is JD required. So that's something where you need to have passed a bar either in that state or where there's reciprocity. And so talking with your employer then to figure out, where I'm taking the bar, will it have reciprocity where I'm practicing? The next one is JD Advantage. So JD Advantage is where in the job description it will say that having a JD, and it's still full-time, but where having a JD is an advantage. So the one I come to mind is working in law school admissions. That is a JD Advantage position. So those who've been to law school, that is one of the preferred qualifications for those. And so when you look at the numbers, you'll see 154 in bar passage required, 11 JD Advantage. Professional position and non-professional positions, I feel like I would go to the definition just to get more information for that. And if those are ones you're worried about, I'd reach out to the school and say, what are these people doing, and see what they can give you. For employed law school, university funded, this is mostly something where they're working at the school. Often it is not a long-term job, but it is probably full-time for at least a year. Some other ones to be looking would be unemployed seeking, where there's 5 in the graduating class for 2017 who are unemployed and still looking for work. And then employment status unknown. There's always those folks who graduate from a class who then hide. And no matter how hard the law school tries, and they will try, their status is unknown. Often, not always, because it's because they're still seeking employment but don't want to tell anyone about it. But you'll want to look at, from the top, all the employed for what kind of you deem important. So if you want to, or at this moment in time, you want to have a job where bar passage is required, look at that number in comparison to the total number and say, okay, this is a good percentage to me.
Right. So that's what I just did. So that's looks like about 86%, right? 154 divided by 181, 85%.
Yeah. And then there's some, like if you're interested in policy work or working for a lobbying firm, a JD as a bar passage may not be required. So that might be JD Advantage. So if there's a certain type of job you're looking at, see what those qualifications are. So that looking at JD Advantage and bar passage required, an even higher, percentage from that group. And then when you go to employment type, break it down to how, if you want to go to a really big law firm, looking at that 500 plus, what proportion of them are actually, or the 250 to 500, what proportion of them are actually going to those really big firms?
So not many, it looks like.
Not many. So traditionally, that's where the really big money is after you graduate. It doesn't mean in some of these medium-sized firms you won't be making a really good living right after graduation. But if you're looking for those, you want to be at one of those top big firms in a city. Not a huge percentage from this school that's going that route.
Got it. Okay. And then I see down here, we've got some numbers about where people are going.
Yeah, so of the 154, probably a little bit more because it's including normally all of the full-time positions. But even 100, let's just say the 180 some, which is everyone in their class.
Yeah.
123 of them are staying in Georgia. You can make the assumption that a lot of them are probably going to Atlanta. And then if you're like, okay, I like Atlanta, this could be a place for me. But you could also go back to the school and ask the question, what about 4th, 5th, and 6th, and what are those numbers looking like? Probably not large if the second and third largest employers are 6 and 6 from South Carolina and North Carolina.
Right. So in the end, it is fairly regional, it seems like.
Mm-hmm.
And just, I don't know, just for comparison, let's look at Harvard's. So most people from Harvard, it looks like, are going to New York. 221, that's out of a total of 610. So it's about a third. 80 people are working in DC. 70 are working in California. 20 are working in foreign countries. So it does look a little, I mean, obviously I'm cherry picking here, but you can see the contrast between the 126 and 6.
Right. And with Harvard, the fourth and fifth aren't going to be, the next number isn't going to be 5 people are the fourth largest employer. It's going to be in probably the 50s or 60s.
Mm-hmm. And then it looks like a good number of people are working in big firms. Okay. Well, that was really helpful.
I just wanted to point out one thing that people could look for as well is the clerkships.
Mm-hmm.
There are some people who are very interested in clerkships, and so you can look at the numbers of people getting federal clerkship positions and state and local.
Mm-hmm.
For people who are interested in becoming litigators at some point, like doing a clerkship is a really valuable and prestigious opportunity. And so that might be something that you look at when you look at these reports.
That's helpful.
And also public interest. A lot of people, they write in their essays like, I want to do good. I want to give back. I want to be a public interest lawyer. So, you see like how much support is there for public interest? Like if people want to do it, does this school send a lot of students into that area of law? I think CUNY has a very, very strong PI program. And another thing that I just wanted to point out was that, so is this Harvard?
This is Georgia.
This is not, this is, yeah. So Harvard
Here's
had
Harvard.
their 500, the number for 500, plus, like that's very big, right? So you see their graduates are going to the really, really big law firms who know how many people they want to have in their, first year associate class 2 years in advance. But I think that, people should not assume that just because some schools have more students taking jobs in sort of mid-size or boutique firms or small firms, that somehow those are lesser positions. One could argue that depending on what type of firm it is and the size, that you could end up getting a lot more experience and learning a lot more if you're not one of like you're not someone in a huge first year associate class where you're maybe not given as much responsibility because it is just such a big, like the whole law firm is a machine, and that there is value to considering a mid-sized firm where you might actually get some more hands-on experience sooner. So that's, I think, important to consider.
Got it. Okay. Well, thank you, Elizabeth and Selene. I think we should open it up to questions now. So if you have a question for us, go ahead and raise your hand. We like to hear your voices, and we'll call on you. And if no one wants to raise their hand, we'll look at what people submitted in the question box. So not getting any hand raisers. So let's take a look here. Hello, my current career path is to transition into an attorney within the company I currently work for. I plan on attending law school part-time in the evening. There are 2 law schools that I'm considering and ultimately think I will have to decide from. One school is ranked between 50 and 100, and the other is 160 plus. I'm a splitter and feel that I might not get a lot in scholarships. Which school would you recommend I attend? Might be hard to answer that question without more information, but I'm going to serve that up to either Elizabeth or Selene, whoever wants to take it.
I'll start, and I'm sure Selene has some excellent insights. I would probably back up and ask the question about if you're planning to work as an attorney for the company you currently work for, do they know that's your plan? If they know that's your plan, are they guaranteeing you a job afterwards? Would they be willing to help pay for your law school tuition? So all of that could play a role, where if you already have a guaranteed job, if they're helping you pay for tuition, it might not necessarily matter as much what school, if you're planning to stay with that company for a while. But if you're really thinking about scholarships, and what those next steps are if you don't stay with that company, I would think a higher ranked school, but this is kind of all speaking very general without having all the information. And also saying, you could get into that 50 to 100 school. But I think my first thing would be, what are those conversations you're having with your employer? And what are they willing to do to help you out before you even start the process? So I kind of ignored the second part of the question. Sorry about that, Selene.
Yeah, I guess I would want a little bit more information as well. Law school, part-time law school, like that can take a while, and a lot of things can happen. And I would want to know, like, how certain are you that you are going to want to continue working at the firm that you're at? Is this law school, going through this process and getting a diploma, a JD, and passing the bar exam, is this all just a means to getting to a higher position within the company? And if that's the case, then I would say, yeah, like it sounds like it matters less what the rank of the school is, because you have a different objective. If you thought there might be a possibility that you might not want to stay at this company, and that you would have to actually go to law school and build a network and sort of figure out, well, if not this type of law, then what else might I be interested? What else might I be good at? And start exploring connections and employment possibilities in different areas. And in that case, I think that probably the access and resources at the 50 to 100 school may be better for you than at the lower rank school. Just speaking very generally, and not knowing anything about the school or the geography and that sort of thing.
All right, well, good luck. Remember, anyone who wants to ask a question is welcome to raise their hand. We'll call on you. Fareed asks, are these employment statistics more relevant to younger students, or are they also relevant to non-traditional students that have been professionally employed, particularly in non-legal professions? So for example, an engineer and business owner that is deciding to go to school, but also in general for the rest of the audience. That's a good question. I mean, I don't know. Do you think that non-traditional students should be looking at these numbers differently? Do you think that being a little older affects your chances of getting a job in law school, after law school?
I think it may affect the type of job that you get. And here's why. The type of big law job that I think I see a lot of prospective students sort of gunning for, it is a really, really tough lifestyle, in that you have no life, and you're making a ton of money, making more money than other first year associates in the country and anywhere else, but it is a huge commitment. And I think it is pretty safe to say that a 27-year-old, 26-year-old is more inclined to sign over 3 to 4 years of their life where they're working 16 hours a day and possibly on holidays. And basically they are they're devoted to the firm and the clients, that someone who's 26 is more inclined to sort of put up with that than someone who's like 40 with a family and children. And I think that someone at a big firm who is looking to put together a first year associate class, like they're looking for a certain type of student too, I think. I think if you're a non-traditional student, then you may be looking for, I think you're looking for different employment opportunities. in which case I would still look at the jobs that require JDs, and I would also look at the bar passage, where people looked to take the bar, to see sort of, it's not on this one, it's there's another screen for it, just to see like, where did people end up working, and there are lots of different ways to be employed as a lawyer other than working at a giant law firm. And I think if that's the case, then really using that Office of Career Services as a resource and really using that alumni network as a resource would be very beneficial. I think that sometimes law students may have a lack of imagination when it comes to sort of the universe of potential legal opportunities, employment opportunities out there.
Got it. Selene, can you maybe help us make heads or tails of this bar passage sheet?
Okay, so
we've got first time bar passage,
right,
ultimate bar passage.
Right, you have people who take it for the first time and pass it, which is, that's a good number to have. You want that to be nice and high. Then you have people who didn't pass it the first time or the second time or the third time, and they continue to take it. And those are the ones who are repeat takers. And then, so I think that when I was working at the law school, the registrar always dealt with this information. So I'm looking at the very bottom box where it says Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
The school's passage rate versus the state's passage rate.
Okay.
I think that's pretty important, that the school would want to have be well above the state number.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you want to compare it to what it was the previous years.
Mm-hmm. So we'd have to go back, right? Generate the report for 2018. I'm not sure if these reports actually are on law school numbers or not. They might be.
I know the bar passage rate is something that the admissions offices they generally release to like Princeton Review and like those types of survey companies. So that is one of those factors that prospective students are supposed to look at.
So Jonah's telling us these are on law school numbers too.
Yeah. So if you're looking at a school where the bar passage rate percentage, whether it's total test takers or first time test takers, is like down in the 50s, then it should give you pause.
Got it. Great. So let's move on because Jonah's actually raising his hand. Jonah, how's it going?
Hey, David. Hey, Selene. Hi, Elizabeth. How y'all doing?
Good.
Wow.
Welcome, Elizabeth. It's the first time I've been able to talk with you. It's awesome having your perspective here on the calls.
Happy to be here.
So I had a question because and David, I had a correction. It's not on law school numbers. It's on law school transparency. That's generally what I use because they pull it straight from the ABA stuff. But what is this is for Elizabeth or Selene? It doesn't matter. What is considered a that's funny. What is considered a non-traditional student? Because I'll be 27 when I graduate law school, and I don't think that that's old, but at the same time, I'm kind of immersed myself in this culture, so I'm kind of losing the shine to everything, and I'm afraid that I'm looking over something. When I think non-traditional, I think a 40-year-old that switched careers. I've worked for the government for 4 years now, and I don't think of it as weird. What do you guys think?
Do you guys think Jonah is weird? Is what he's asking.
Yes, that's the question.
I'd like to get you know you a little bit better to determine that. But I don't necessarily think you're a non-traditional student. That most schools, the average age is 24, 25. So for you coming in, you'd be going to be right around that average age. I do think for people who have worked in a professional capacity for a few years, when there is a big chunk of your classmates that are right from undergrad, you might feel much older right at the beginning, that your perspectives, just in approaching life and the start of law school might be a little bit different. But a few weeks in, you'll all be in study groups together and sharing notes and realizing you're just as smart as one another, even though your street smarts might not be the same level. So I wouldn't consider you a non-traditional student, but I think your perspective might be a little bit different right when you start law school.
Got it. Thanks.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Okay. Any other questions for us live before we go back to the question box? Anonymous attendee asks, how often do people transfer after their first year into a higher ranked school? Well, this is also something we can look up. These are in 509 disclosures. These are also, I'll just point that out. We put together a big Google Sheet with a ton of this info. So this first tab has the info you'd expect. It has LSAT medians and 25th and 50th percentile. And it has some information about tuition, although actually this column is wonky because some of these schools reported per semester and some reported per year. Minority students enrolled at the school, which you can compare to the, well, actually, I think I only put first year class size. Oh, here we go, number of students. Then we have all this info like percent of students who get scholarships at all, and percent of students who get scholarships that cover full tuition. But if you go to this tab, the complete ABA disclosures, so this is just a slightly processed version of the ABA spreadsheet that shows absolutely everything. And this includes information about transfers, although to be honest, I would have to search for the column because there are so many of them. But anyway, Elizabeth and Selene, I want to ask you that too. How often do people transfer?
On the ABA website, with the 509 information, I think it's the first link. If you're thinking, oh, I might want to try to transfer into this particular school, you can look up that particular target school and okay.
Let's look at Duke.
Okay. And then I believe if you scroll
all the way to the bottom.
Yeah. All the way more.
Oh, here we go. Okay, right.
So how many people leave? How many people come in? And then where do they come from?
Schools from which students transferred in. Okay, so at Duke, we had students transferring from Arizona, Iowa, and Michigan. 2 from North Carolina and 1 from South Carolina. Great, and then I'll also just point out that we wrote a blog post about this. I just found it by Googling 7-stage transfer. And when I say we, I mean Selene. Anyway, it's right here. This has a lot of information about what you need to keep in mind if you want to transfer. So I'll just paste this URL into the chat window for you. Okay. Anything else to say about transfers? All right, we can move on. Done. Okay. Before I answer another question from the question box, calling everyone to raise their hand once again if you want to talk to us. It's more fun than just listening to my voice.
Hey, David, this is Jonah. Do you mind if I ask another follow-up question?
Sure.
My Seven Sage LSAT membership is expiring in May. I want to get the admissions course, and I know we talked a little bit about it. Should I just get the admissions course since I'm just applying this upcoming fall cycle, or keep the LSAT portion? I'm not really sure what the pros and cons are doing either.
Okay, good question. So, for those of you who don't know what Jonah's talking about, I'll show you. So again, I switched my site to the admissions course, and then I go to syllabus. This is the admissions course. Most of it's free. It looks like it's all free right now because I'm logged in and I gave myself access to all of it. But you can see that some of it is actually locked. So again, most of it's free, but the essay banks are locked, and to purchase these, you'll need a $10 upgrade. So that's what Jonah was talking about. That's the admissions course. Jonah, I think whether or not you keep the LSAT course just depends on whether you're going to retake the LSAT. There's no reason to extend your access if you're done taking the LSAT. If you are not done taking the LSAT, you should extend your access. That make sense?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure. Okay. So I'm going to go back to this question. In regards to bar passage rate, Brooklyn Law School had a 73.19% rate compared to 81.30 state pass percentage. I already deposited at this law school. I'm also considering Seton Hall, 75 school versus 81 state. Should this be a cause of worry for me? The fact that Brooklyn Law has a lower bar passage rate than the state average. That's a great question. Selene, can you field this one first?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely something that you should notice. And I think it's definitely something that you can ask the admissions office about, like, what is the school doing about this? I know that there is the belief at law schools by, professors, some professors, that the purpose of a law school education is not to teach to the bar, that they're trying to teach you how to understand the law and how to evaluate fact patterns and teach you how to think like a lawyer, not teach you how to pass the bar exam. That is what commercial bar review courses are for. And that's something that was very commonly heard when I was in law school. So that said, if a school is below the state average, I would think that students and the administration would put some thought into providing resources to students to get that number, up to the state percentage rate or above. Are they offering special courses that are focused on, helping students better prepare for the bar? What are they doing to change that number? I know that a bunch of schools are trying different programs, maybe focusing more on lawyering skills, essay writing skills, things that you would need to use specifically on the bar exam, and maybe like putting less emphasis on elective courses. So I think definitely if you're admitted and this is a point of concern for you, that you should talk to the admissions office and see what they say and see if they make you feel better about your choice.
Any other thoughts on this, Elizabeth?
I would, am I muted? I can't tell.
No,
I'm not. Okay, excellent. I would also look at what's the bar passage rate over the past couple years. Sometimes there just could be a year where there was a dip or a spike. So I think it's also important to look at, what are the trends looking like over the past couple years.
Got it. Thanks. Okay, any other questions for us? We have one. what if you have a 2.5 GPA, but a 171 score? I don't know what the question is. I would say you're clearly very capable. You should probably think about writing a GPA addendum. We actually have a section on addenda in the course. It's called addenda. And two parts you might want to look at are when to write a non-required addendum, how to write a non-required addendum. We have a sample grades addendum, so you can see the first draft and then you can see what it looked like after we cut it down. So let me send this to the group. And I would say check that out. Any other thoughts on this, even though it's not quite a question, Elizabeth or Selene?
I would say it would really depend on a lot of different factors and how you choose to present your story in your overall application. Is your GPA a result of having gone to an extremely challenging school, or having a very challenging major, or certain factors in your life that prevented you from perhaps having the academic performance that you wanted? I think that all, and how you choose to present that, I think will affect your chances. And I'd say cast a very wide net because depending on what your school list looks like, you may have some success.
Got it. Thanks. Okay, and then we have a question. What are the boxes on the bar passage disclosure that I should pay the most attention to? So Selene highlighted these boxes at the bottom, the percentage you pass from the school versus the percentage you pass from the state. Elizabeth, are there any other parts of this that you think merit a special attention?
I think I'm with Selene in saying that, our registrar looked at that kind of first and foremost. So let me just take more of a gander at it. I think in general, asking questions, not just about, and this might not be in this information, but it might be from the school. It's not just the first time bar passage. Or it could be what percentage took the bar in July, or which ones waited till February. How many people passed first time? Did it take them a second time? In Virginia right now, I'm seeing a lot of information out there that certain schools were number one on February bar passage compared to all the other schools in Virginia. But they held the majority of their students to take the bar till February. So they might have done better than UVA, but UVA only had one person take the bar in February. I don't know if those are the exact numbers, but kind of discerning the information a little bit more than kind of just what's out there.
Got it.
But I think looking like the calendar year 2018 under first time bar passage, that number from previous years taking bar for the first time. So it could be a question of what are people doing in that year where they didn't take the bar. And to column E, total first time test takers in any jurisdiction, 193, bar passage in any jurisdiction, 162. So that's not just, whatever state it was, but what is the kind of the general pass rate, which I think would be interesting just to see general about the school and the students coming from that school. But it does, I think, depend too on what state. And some state bars are much harder than others. So you could say if there was a Georgia and Virginia bar, I know the Virginia bar is a really hard one to pass. So there might be a lower percentage passing the Virginia bar, but doesn't necessarily say as much about the school, but it could be the caliber and the strength of the bar exam that students are taking.
So that's why it's important to compare apples to apples by looking at the state pass rate.
Yes.
Because the bar, unlike the LSAT, is not a standardized test.
Yes.
At least it's not standard across the whole country. Okay, good to know. Thanks. So do we have any last questions? All right. Well, I want to thank all of you so much for attending. I hope you got something out of this, and we'll be here again next week.